over the past few months, I've had friends and family and even folks I know on Facebook reach out to me because I'm an IT guy because they've had problems with their home network, their Wi-Fi, mostly around performance and connectivity. So I figured I'd create a quick video to share what I've found. You may have other issues or other solutions, which by the way, if you do, putting it in the comments would be a big help. But I figured I'd share what has helped us, and I'll get right to the solutions so that you could see what I did, and if that's good enough, go ahead. But I'll explain my thinking as well. So what they came to me with was, hey, my videos aren't streaming well. There's a lot of buffering going on with Netflix or Prime or YouTube. The browser pages aren't working right. They're not loading at all, or they're slow. Video conferencing is warbling. If they're on the Zoom conference, it may get that staticky look. And this was mostly the dads, believe it or not. But they were very vocal about getting fragged because of lag, and nobody wants that. So I can certainly sympathize. So what do you do? And this is what I did. This is what I suggested that they do. And this is what has worked most of the time for home Wi-Fi network issues that are already set up and are having a problem. First, check your Wi-Fi coverage. Make sure you've got connectivity wherever your devices are. You may want to reposition the router. Top of the house is always best. You may want to add Wi-Fi extenders or move to mesh. That's something to consider. The next thing you want to do, and this could be the first thing that you do, I often do this first, is reboot everything. Just clear everything out. Reboot your modem, reboot your router, reboot your PC, your Windows device, your iPad, whatever you're having a problem with, and just reboot it all. The other thing, and this is a gotcha that got me, and I'm a little embarrassed about this one, but it also got two other people that I know. Check to ensure that that cable between the modem and your Wi-Fi router is Cat 6. You want that to be Cat 6 or Cat 6A. And the last thing you do, and this is where people start first, but do this last, check your upload and download speed to your router and your devices, and increase your bandwidth only if you really need to. So those are the solutions. I'll go into them a little bit more. First, check your Wi-Fi coverage. This is a non-IT dialogue. So if you look on your device, they all have those three curved network signal strength, and that's going to be good enough. There are other ways to do it, but if you're seeing that you only have 2 bars, or if you have 1 bar, or if they're bouncing up and down, that's an indication that you probably need to address your coverage. There are other ways to check your coverage, but we're talking about at home, and you really just want a bulletproof, rock solid 3-bar Wi-Fi connectivity at home, regardless of the bandwidth that you have. So you want to check that. Also, you want to check the positioning of that Wi-Fi router. Up top on your house is best, but every house is a little bit different. Every need is a little bit different, so you can figure out where to put that. So this is a representation of an Orbi mesh network. Orbi's a good mesh network. There are other good mesh networks. I'm not selling Orbi. I just happen to take their image, and they are good. But in this case, if you look and you see the router, it's in the basement, and that's the same with mine. My router's in the basement. That's where my office is, and it just makes sense for me. However, typically you're going to get the best coverage if it's up in the top of your house somewhere. You don't want to put it in an attic or someplace that's difficult to get to, because you may want to connect a physical network connection to it. You certainly have to connect your modem to it, but you may have printers or other things. I connect my laptop directly to it via a network cable. So I want to have it close by, and that's the reason why I have it in the office in the basement. Positioning of your Wi-Fi router is important. You want to make sure you have as good as coverage as possible. There's a lot of things that can get in the way of Wi-Fi. I've heard people say that your cordless phone will not, the landline cordless phone will not interfere, but it does. I've installed a lot of Wi-Fi networks in offices and warehouses, and there's a lot of different things that are going to impact your Wi-Fi coverage. Oddly enough, I've found that water interferes with Wi-Fi coverage more than metal. So you're going to have both in your house. You're going to have water running through your house as well as metal. So you just have to kind of play around with it. Up top is best, but it'll work in the basement too. I have a colonial, so I've got a decent amount of space to cover. So what's represented in this diagram here is a good setup. You've got your Wi-Fi router, and then you've got two satellites. Now this is mesh, but it would work the same with extenders. So if your Wi-Fi router isn't covering, and in a bigger house it probably won't, in an apartment it probably will, probably. If it doesn't cover every room, you're going to want to look at extending your network out, and probably the easiest ways to do it is either through mesh or Wi-Fi extenders. So first I'll talk about the mesh, since that's what this diagram is. You just find two places to put your satellites, and it'll extend your network coverage. The pros of a mesh network, of going out and getting a mesh Wi-Fi router with the satellites, is that the coverage is great. It's full duplex, meaning you've got communication going both ways, both to your device and also back to the router and out to the ISP. So you're going to get the full use of that bandwidth. It's also comes with a lot of good management tools that if you want to use, you could use. It's also a pretty solid system, so you're paying for it, which is the only con I can think of, is you're paying for it. You're going to pay for that mesh network, and the cost is changing a bit, but it is more than just buying a Wi-Fi router. So this diagram, in terms of whether this is a mesh network or these are extenders, is a pretty good one to get the coverage. So the alternative to that mesh network is just a extender. And what I did was I went to eBay and I found these Netgear, and again, I'm not selling anything from Netgear, but I found these Netgear refurbed extenders for 25 bucks. And I put a couple in my house. I've got a nice sized colonial house. The coverage is everything we need. So the upside is you get good coverage. It is easy to install. It's extremely economical. The downside is it's half duplex. So you got to keep that in mind. You're only going to get the traffic one way. If you're not a power user of your network, you're probably not going to notice. It's going to stream video fine. I do video conferencing while videos are playing on Netflix and Prime throughout the house without an issue. So you can kind of choose. But the thing is, the coverage in your house, you want to make sure you check that out. If you don't have good coverage, that's going to impact your performance. This, what I said before, might be the first thing you want to try. It certainly is the easiest thing to try. People laugh at it. You call the help desk at work, right? And the first thing they tell you to do is, hey, reboot your PC. And you laugh or you're frustrated. There's a reason they do that. So I've been in IT for over 35 years, and there's two axioms I use all the time, different areas. One is, a test is worth 1,000 guesses. Always test something out before you try it. That way you make sure you know it works and you're not assuming. The other thing is, a reboot solves a multitude of sins. And what does that mean? Everything gets updated. Your modem gets updated. Your router gets updated. Your PC gets updated. Your iPhones, your pads, your Android phones, every device that you have is downloading updates. Now those updates could work fine. They could require reboot. They may do it on their own, or they could download, start to install, and hang out and wait for reboot and leave you in a deprecated state. So you need to reboot. Also, there's a lot of apps out there that just don't work well because they leak memory, and the only way to really solve that is shut them down and reboot your device. So if you take the time just to reboot everything from the modem, and some of the ISPs will tell you not to reboot the modem, but your house is going to lose power at some point, so you should be able to reboot the modem, and your Wi-Fi router, and your PCs and whatever other devices you have, you'll be in good shape. If you're worried about an older device being powered off and on again, that's true. When you're powering a device on, that's the most likely time that it's going to fail. But devices now tend to be a little bit more robust. There is obsolescence built in, so you need to be aware of that too. Everything in my house gets rebooted at a minimum of once a quarter. So it's something to think about. If you're having a problem, it's probably the number one culprit of performance issues and number one fix. So this one's a little bit embarrassing for me because when I put in my Wi-Fi router 2 years ago, I made a mistake. I went to my box of cables that every dad has, and I pulled out a network cable to put between my Wi-Fi router and my modem. And I didn't realize, because I wasn't paying attention, I put in a Cat5 cable. Cat5 will only get you to 100 meg. So it took me longer than I wanted to think of to figure out, oh, it's the cable. It should have dawned on me right away that I wasn't getting the bandwidth that I'm supposed to get. So I replaced the cable. My recommendation is make sure that's a Cat 6 or 6A cable. A Cat 5E cable will probably do the trick for you, but you're better off the Cat 6 or Cat 6A. It's going to be a more stable connection anyway. So I'm not the only one who's fallen for this. I've caught it on at least two other people, and I help them out. So take a look at it. It's worth 30 seconds to just look at the cable. It should be printed right on the side of the cable. So what if you've done all of that and you're still having a problem? I kind of sigh at this because this is where people jump to right away, at least on Facebook and some of my friends. And I'm going to tell you, it's the last place to look at for good reason. So look at your bandwidth to your ISP. So you want to check your upload and download bandwidth. You don't want to do it from your device, although it's good to know what it is to your device, but that's going to really tell you what throughput you're getting through the router to the device. You want to see what you're getting from your ISP. So you need to get onto your Wi-Fi router, and most Wi-Fi routers will have a way to check the bandwidth that's available to you. Now that's the bandwidth that's available to you, so you need to be aware of that. Most of them will use speed test, and you've probably seen it out there. So do it from your router and then see if you're getting what you're supposed to get. Now I use 300 meg in my house, and I'll see typically anywhere from 240 to 280, somewhere around there. So that's okay. You're probably not going to see, if you have 300 meg or a gig, you're not going to see the full amount. You'll see part of it. Also, it depends upon the contract that you have. During high usage periods, it may drop down further. I'm in New York using Verizon, so it's pretty robust. Once you know that, if you don't have the bandwidth that you're supposed to have, it's going to be two things. It's going to be you or the ISP. So if it's you, I'm putting money on is that cable I was just talking about. Make sure you have a Cat 6 cable, because that'll govern what you're getting. The other thing is, it could be your ISP. It's not unheard of for them to have a problem, and they're governing what's coming into you. And you give them a call, and they should be able to troubleshoot and fix that. If you call them though and say, how much bandwidth am I using and how much do I need? That's the thing I'm saying don't do, unless if you absolutely have to, because most ISPs will jump right to selling it to you. And part of the reason why is I called a Verizon tech to talk to about this. I said, how much bandwidth am I using? Because that's the key. It's not how much bandwidth do I have, it's how much am I using. And in corporate IT, there's a lot of tools you can use to trend that out. Some of the routers have decent to poor trending tools for usage, and then you kind of need to have a little bit of an idea of how to read that. But I figured I can call the Verizon tech, and I wanted to see what they had and what they could recommend. She didn't have a tool to use, they weren't giving their technicians that speak to customers the ability to really look at the usage. Now, number one, communicating that usage to customers is problematic because it's a little more complex than people would like to believe. They get confused between speed, usage, and bandwidth. Understandable. It takes a little bit of experience and knowledge to know how that works. But what she was telling me was the only thing I could see is that you're a high user for your bandwidth bracket. I didn't believe it because of what I'm experiencing and what I'm seeing. So I question whatever they're going to communicate back to you. It's either that the techs don't have the right tools to help you out, or they're just trying to upsell you. So I don't like paying for anything. I mean, I just talked about buying a refurbed Wi-Fi extender. So that's a pretty good example. I just don't like to pay for things. So I don't want to pay for bandwidth I'm not going to use. If you're good buying a gig of bandwidth and not use it, that's fine. Then you're not going to have bandwidth problems. So my recommendation is if you do think you have a bandwidth problem, and some people will, some people 300 meg is not going to be enough for them, then go slowly. Bump it up to their next tier. And check with them. If I bump my bandwidth up, am I going to pay for anything? So if there's no install fee, then there's no harm in just bumping it up to the next tier. The problem with bumping it up all the way and then trying to drop it down to really what you need is more times than not the ISP will charge you an install fee to bump it down because they don't want you to bump it down. So that's something to think about. But you may also want to figure out, hey, I've got a lot of people in my house using games and videos, and I think my demand is pretty high. What do I do? I'll be honest, I've never done this for my household. There's only 4 of us in the house. We do use games, we do use video, we work from home, so we're on Zoom a lot, all at the same time. My phone comes over the internet as well. So we have a fair amount of usage. We haven't experienced any problems that were bandwidth related. However, you may have a high bandwidth usage household and you want to figure it out. I pulled this from How to Geek, and it's a pretty good, I believe this when I look at it. It passed the sniff test for me in terms of how they're looking at it. So you may want to create a spreadsheet and say, hey, I've got X number of people that are going to be using these applications at the same time, and figure out what bandwidth you're going to need. You're going to need to figure out it's concurrent, not just I'm going to use it at some point in my life, because at the same time you want to think about it. And also keep in mind, and this is kind of an unknown factor, all those activities for those devices that are connected through Wi-Fi or hard connected to your network are going to be downloading things like updates or communicating back and forth to servers, even if you're not on them. It's a lot more chatty than you think, typically. So it's something to think about. Now, from a corporate perspective, there are tools out there that you'd use, and we keep pretty close track of the usage, and we look for spikes, and we make sure that we're getting the bandwidth that we're contracted for, and we know how we're using it, when the peaks are, so we kind of measure it all out. At home, you're probably not going to spend the time to do it. I've never created the spreadsheet for home, but when I've built networks for the corporate environment, absolutely. We've come up with rules of thumb per person, per activity, per servers. We've put it all on a spreadsheet to figure out the bandwidth that we need. So something to think about. So just to summarize on the bandwidth, looking at the bandwidth piece, because I think it's important, and I think it's also the last place you go. Make sure you're getting what you're paying for. Take a look at the bandwidth to the router. Go onto your router, look at your router's manual. It should show you what's available and how to look at the bandwidth. They all should be able to do a speed test from the router. I had a friend who bought a new router and was asking me, hey, do I need to bump up my bandwidth? And I said to him, well, how much bandwidth do you have? And it's just him and his wife who was in the house. And he said, well, I don't know. So first I pointed him to the router to try to get a look at the bandwidth, and I could tell his eyes were glazing over. So I said, look at your bill. And he looked at his bill and said, oh, I've got 100 meg. And I said to him, well, that's not a lot, but there's only two of you, so it may be fine. And I asked them, how are things going? Have you noticed any network issues, any slowness anywhere? And he said, no, things are fine. I said, great, keep it. Don't pay more for it. So keep that in mind. If you think you are heavy users, you can attempt to figure out the concurrent device usage, and then you've got to put in a little bit of a guess for that overhead that's going to be going on from all your devices on the network that when you're not using them. And if you do decide to upgrade your bandwidth, keep your cost in mind. Unless if you don't care about the cost, but keep the cost in mind. Is there a fee just to upgrade outside of the month-to-month fee? Is there a fee to downgrade? And I would do it tier by tier if there's no upgrade fee. So that's it. Those are the steps that I've taken my friends and family through in order to figure out their Wi-Fi issues. Let me know in the comment section if this helped. If it didn't help, let me know. And thanks for listening.